An inquest into the disappearance of William Tyrrell is this week focusing on the police theory that his foster mother loaded his body into a car and buried it after an accidental death. Counsel assisting told the probe today it's thought she illegally disposed of the remains when the toddler fatally fell from the balcony of his foster grandmother's home. The allegations have long been denied.
20 minutes from here, in a town called Kendall, a 3-year-old boy named William Tyrrell vanished in 2014 while wearing an identical costume. The case became one of Australia's most haunting mysteries. And now, after 11 years of silence, unanswered questions, and an investigation that tore through suspects, detectives, and even itself, the woman at the center of it all is finally speaking. What she's about to reveal could rewrite everything we thought we knew. But before we get there, I need to know, where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments. And if you're new to Crime Cortex, hit that subscribe button, because this story is about to take a turn no one saw coming. Let's go back to the beginning. September 12, 2014. A Friday morning in Kendall, a quiet town on the mid-north coast of New South Wales. The kind of place where streets dead end into forest, where the hum of cicadas fills the spaces between conversations, where everyone knows everyone. Benaroon Drive is one of those streets. A cul-de-sac pressed against the edge of the bush, lined with modest homes and tidy gardens. At the end of the road sits a grandmother's house, white weatherboard, a wide veranda with wooden spindles, the kind of place that smells like tea and old carpet and safety. That morning, 3-year-old William Tyrrell woke up excited. He was visiting with his foster parents and his older sister. Overnight trips to Grandma's house were special. There were no rules about bedtime snacks, no rush to get dressed, no reason not to wear your favorite outfit all day long. And William's favorite outfit? A Spider-Man suit, bright red with blue webbing across the chest and arms. He pulled it on over his clothes like armor, like he could do anything. The morning unfolded the way 1,000 other mornings do in 1,000 other homes. Breakfast, the soft shuffle of adults making tea, kids running between the front yard and the back, their laughter rising and falling like a tide. William's foster mother stood on the veranda, watching him play. At one point, she pulled out her phone. 10 a.m. She snapped a photo. William crouched low on the wooden boards, hands curled into claws, face lit up with a grin that looked like it might explode into a roar. He was pretending to be a tiger, or maybe a superhero, or both. It didn't matter. He was 3. The world was big, and he was brave, and the morning stretched out in front of him like a gift. That photo, the one you've probably seen if you've followed this case at all, is the last confirmed image of William Tyrrell, because moments later, he was gone. It happened fast. Faster than it takes to boil a kettle. Faster than it takes to finish a sentence. His foster mother called out to him. No answer. She walked to the edge of the veranda, looked toward the garden. Nothing. She circled the house, checked the side yard, peered past the fence line into the scrub. Her voice got louder, sharper. William? Still nothing. She went back inside, checked the bedrooms, the bathroom, the hallway. She grabbed the car keys and drove up and down Benaroon Drive, scanning the road, the driveways, the bush line. Neighbors came out, voices overlapped. Panic started to creep in, cold and fast, the way it does when a child doesn't answer, and then doesn't answer again. At 10:56 a.m., she dialed 00. My son is missing. Police arrived at 11:06 a.m., 10 minutes. But by then, the clock had already started ticking in a way that would never stop. Within hours, Kendall transformed. Uniformed officers moved through the bush in tight lines, eyes locked on the ground, searching for footprints, disturbed leaves, a flash of red and blue. SES volunteers in orange vests fanned out across paddocks. Rural fire service trucks idled at the edges of fire trails. Tracker dogs and their handlers worked the scent, noses down, bodies tense with focus. Overhead, the Polair helicopter circled, Rotors thumping, scanning the canopy. Divers went into dams. Searchers waded through creeks. The operation expanded from house to house, yard to yard, drain to drain. Within days, it covered kilometers of rugged, unforgiving terrain. But there was a detail, small, strange, heavy with implication, that would haunt investigators for years. The dogs detected William's scent in the yard, strong and clear, but not beyond it. Not on the street, not in the bush, nowhere else. In a landscape where a toddler could wander off and disappear into the trees in minutes, the absence of a scent trail didn't make sense, unless he didn't wander, unless someone carried him, unless the boundary between the yard and the world outside was crossed by hands that weren't his own. It wasn't proof, but it was a thread, and investigators would pull on it again and again, trying to unravel what it meant. Because here's the thing about missing children: the first few hours are everything. The first day is a race, the first week is a prayer, and after that, you're searching for something else entirely. William Tyrrell vanished in broad daylight, in a quiet town, from a yard surrounded by people who loved him. No scream, no struggle, no witnesses, just a photo at 10:01 a.m. and an empty veranda minutes later. And 11 years on, no one knows where he went. Benaroon Drive is a dead end, one way in, one way out. That fact alone shapes the geometry of suspicion. On a street like this, unfamiliar cars stand out. Strangers are noticed. And on the morning William disappeared, there were cars that didn't belong. William's foster mother later told police she'd seen 2 vehicles parked nose to tail between driveways earlier that morning. A white station wagon and a gray sedan, both unoccupied, windows down. It was odd enough to catch her attention, odd enough to stick in her memory. After William vanished, police put out an urgent appeal. They released descriptions. They asked the drivers to come forward. They waited. No one came. Sketches were drawn. Media outlets ran the images. Investigators combed through traffic camera footage, doorbell videos, anything that might place those cars in time and space. But the drivers never materialized, and over the years in courtrooms and inquests, the questions got sharper. Were those cars really there? Were they seen by anyone else? Or did memory, desperate, searching, trying to make sense of the senseless, fill in the blanks? Some details were corroborated, some weren't. The cars were never conclusively identified. They remained a contour in the narrative, a shape without substance, a question without an answer. But they weren't the only sightings. A neighbor recalled a sedan doing a U-turn in a driveway around 9:01 a.m. Another witness reported a 4-wheel drive speeding away from the area mid-morning. Each sighting raised the temperature. Each one felt like it could be the key. But none of them delivered the hard connective tissue of a case. None of them led anywhere. If you think about it in cinematic terms, this is a montage of recollections played from slightly different angles. The same clip of a car reversing, the same wide shot of a quiet street framed by trees. It's also a lesson in how a community tries to help itself and how unreliable that help can be, even when it's offered with the best intentions. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Human memory is not a recording. It's a reconstruction. And under the weight of trauma, fear, and the desperate need to be useful, memory can shift. Details sharpen or blur. Timelines compress. A car you saw last week becomes a car you saw that morning. A shadow becomes a person. A person becomes a suspect. And in a case like this, where every detail matters, where every lead could be the one that breaks it open, those distortions can send an investigation down roads that lead nowhere. But at the time, in those first frantic days, the cars felt significant. They felt like proof that someone had been watching, waiting, that William's disappearance wasn't random, that it was planned. And maybe it was. Or maybe the cars were just cars, parked by someone visiting a neighbor, driven by someone who took a wrong turn and never thought twice about it. Someone who has no idea they're part of a mystery that's consumed a nation for over a decade. We still don't know. What we do know is this. Benaroon Drive, a street where nothing ever happened, became the epicenter of one of Australia's most exhaustive investigations. and the questions that started there. Who was on that street? What did they see? What did they do? Are questions that still don't have answers. When a child goes missing, the response is immediate and overwhelming. But when days turn into weeks and weeks turn into months, the response has to evolve. It has to become something more structured, more methodical, more relentless. Strike Force Roseanne was formed to find William Tyrrell. It grew into the kind of police operation that feels less like a task force and more like an organism, constantly expanding, adapting, consuming resources and information in equal measure. Detectives, analysts, forensic specialists, telecommunications experts, call takers monitoring a tip line that never stopped ringing, document stacks that multiplied like cells, witness statements, transcripts, subpoena returns, digital forensics logs, surveillance footage, phone records, financial data. Every lead was followed, every theory was tested. Every person who had been on or near Benaroon Drive that morning was interviewed, re-interviewed, and cross-referenced. But 2 years in, with no breakthrough, the New South Wales government decided to try something different. September 12, 2016. The second anniversary of William's disappearance. The Premier stood alongside the police commissioner and senior detectives in front of a wall of cameras and announced a $1 million reward, one of the largest in the state's history. But here's what made it unusual. The reward didn't require an arrest. It didn't require a conviction. It only required one thing: information that led to William's recovery. The message was clear, deliberate, and aimed at anyone who might be in the chain of knowledge. If you know where he is, you can tell us. You can walk away, and you'll be paid for doing it. No questions, no charges, just bring him home. It was a calculated move, a way to crack open the silence that had settled over the case like fog, a way to reach someone who might be protecting someone else, or someone who might be protecting themselves. As of today, 11 years later, that reward remains unclaimed, which means one of two things. Either no one knows where William is, or the people who do know aren't talking. And that's the weight Strike Force Roseanne has been carrying for over a decade, the knowledge that somewhere, someone might hold the answer, and they're choosing to stay silent. Real quick, what time is it where you are right now? Midnight? Morning? Middle of the day? Drop it in the comments. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next, because this case is about to get even more complicated. In any missing person case, investigators build a map of proximity, opportunity, motive, and history. And in William Tyrrell's case, that map rearranged itself around 3 men. Each of them became a person of interest. Each of them was investigated, surveilled, and publicly scrutinized. And each of them, in the end, was never charged with anything related to William's disappearance. But the damage was done. The neighbor, Paul Savage. Paul Savage lived directly across the street from the house where William vanished. He knew Benaroon Drive. He knew its rhythms, its routines, its residents. And on the morning of September 12, 2014, he joined the search. He said he tramped through the bush for about an hour, calling William's name, looking for any sign of the boy. To all appearances, he was a concerned neighbor doing what neighbors do. But over time, inconsistencies emerged, small things, details that didn't quite line up, what he heard, whether he saw the foster father arrive, how long he actually searched, whether he'd noticed those unfamiliar vehicles. Inconsistencies aren't crimes, but they're cracks, and investigators pressed into them. Police bugged Savage's home. They recorded his conversations, hours and hours of audio capturing the mundane, grieving rhythms of a man whose wife had recently died. They staged an operation involving a Spider-Man suit, placing it in a location where Savage would encounter it, watching to see how he'd react. The pressure was relentless, the surveillance was invasive, and the methods would later become a problem. In 2020, Detective Chief Inspector Gary Jubilin, the lead investigator on William's case, was convicted of illegally recording Paul Savage without proper authorization. 4 counts, a $10,000 fine. He appealed. The appeal was dismissed. The court's language was sharp. It described methods deployed at the edge of their legal boundaries, the humiliation of a man who was never charged, the risk that such tactics might corrode any case that could be built later. For Paul Savage, the years brought grief, suspicion, and finally the hollow victory of not being charged. He lived under a cloud, and even when the cloud lifted, the damage remained. The repairman, Bill Spedding. 3 days before William disappeared, a man named Bill Spedding visited the house on Benaroon Drive. He was there to give a quote on a broken washing machine. He was scheduled to return to do the repair, but he didn't show up on September 12th. That fact alone made him interesting to investigators. In January 2015, 4 months after William vanished, police executed search warrants at Spedding's home and business. They brought cameras, they brought excavators, they drained his septic tank while neighbors watched and news crews filmed. They carried out a mattress. They tore through his life. And they found nothing. Nothing that tied him to William Tyrrell. But the investigation didn't stop there. Months later, Spedding was charged with historical child sex offenses, allegations unrelated to Kendall, unrelated to William, but damning in the court of public opinion. The charges were eventually dismissed. The case fell apart. And Bill Spedding, his reputation destroyed, his livelihood gone, turned around and sued the state. He sued for malicious prosecution, for misfeasance, for abuse of process. And he won. The court's findings were damning. They described an investigation that pursued unrelated charges as leverage, that used the blunt force of accusation to break a man because he fit the profile of a suspect, that collapsed the boundaries of good order and due process in the hunt for a result. Spedding was awarded substantial damages, but money doesn't restore a reputation. It doesn't give you back the years you spent under suspicion. It doesn't erase the headlines or the whispers or the way people looked at you. For Bill Spedding, vindication came too late, and it came incomplete. The man in the bush, Frank Abbott. Frank Abbott lived on the edge of Kendall in a caravan, tucked into the scrub. He was a convicted sex offender, and that fact alone made him a person of interest. Witnesses described unsettling behavior, disturbing comments. One person remembered Abbott talking about a peculiar smell in the bush nearby. Another recalled him saying police were searching in the wrong place. Investigators combed the ground around his former camp. They searched old sawmill sites. They interviewed him in prison, where he was serving time for unrelated offenses. He remained an object of dark fascination during the coronial inquest. His name came up again and again, but no charge ever followed. These 3 men, Savage, Spedding, Abbott, illustrate the geometry of suspicion: proximity, opportunity, character, history. All of it intersecting in ways that feel obvious until they're not. But they also illustrate something else, something darker. The pain of a missing child radiates outward. It wounds everyone it touches. And sometimes it wounds people who are blameless. It destroys reputations. It breaks lives. It turns neighbors into suspects and suspicion into a kind of violence. And on the other side of that coin, it can make investigators reach beyond the bounds set for them. It can make them cut corners, bend rules, deploy tactics that feel justified in the moment, but corrode the integrity of the case in the long run. That's the cost of a case like this. It's not just the boy who's lost, it's everyone who gets pulled into the orbit of his absence. For years, Detective Chief Inspector Gary Jubilin was the public face of the William Tyrrell investigation. He spoke with the steady intensity of a man who had chosen a fight with the void. He was relentless, driven, uncompromising. And then, in 2020, he became the story. Jubilin was convicted of illegally recording conversations with Paul Savage, 4 counts under the Surveillance Devices Act. He was fined $10,000. He appealed. The appeal was dismissed. When a lead detective stands in the dock, the narrative curdles. The investigation that was supposed to find a missing boy becomes an investigation into itself. The methods that were supposed to deliver justice become the subject of judicial scrutiny, And the questions multiply. Were the wrong people targeted? Were lines of inquiry starved because resources were poured into dead ends? Did the pursuit of a result, any result, corrode the process that might have actually secured one? Sober voices insisted on nuance. The illegality of a particular set of recordings, they said, doesn't invalidate the broader work of a multi-year, multi-person investigation. Jubilee's conviction doesn't mean the entire case is compromised. But in the heat of a story as personal and painful as a missing child, nuance dissolves. The courtroom transcript became a lens, and like all lenses, it magnified and distorted in equal measure. Jubilee's fall didn't just change the leadership of Strike Force Roseanne. It changed how the public looked at the case. It raised doubts about what had been done, what had been missed, and whether the investigation had been chasing the right leads at all. And here's the hard truth. We may never know. Because once an investigation turns on itself, once the methods are questioned and the leadership is prosecuted, the integrity of everything that came before is called into doubt. That's not to say the work wasn't real, that the thousands of hours, the interviews, the forensic analysis, the surveillance, none of that disappears. But it's tainted, and in a courtroom, taint matters. If this case ever goes to trial, Jubilee's conviction will be litigated again. Defense attorneys will use it to argue that the investigation was flawed from the start, that corners were cut, that evidence was gathered improperly, that the whole thing is poisoned fruit, and they might be right. If you're finding this as intense as I am, do me a favor, hit that like button and share this video. The algorithm needs to know this story matters, and trust me, we're not even close to done yet. 7 years after William Tyrrell disappeared, the search came back to Kendall. But this time, the tone was different. The language was different. The goal was different. This wasn't a rescue mission anymore. In late 2021, police returned to Benaroon Drive with a new vocabulary: ground-penetrating radar, luminol, sifting stations, hydrologist. The operation was public, deliberate, and impossible to miss. Grid tape went up. Shade tents appeared. Trucks delivered compact excavators. Forensic officers in pale blue suits carried sieves to long tables where shovel loads of soil and leaf litter were teased apart, shaken, examined under harsh light. Around the house on Benaroon Drive, attention clustered in specific areas, under the balcony line, inside the garage, where a concrete slab had been poured sometime after 2014. The ground-penetrating radar operator's screen translated the Earth into strata of signal, looking for anomalies, disturbances, anything that didn't belong. Out along Batar Creek Road and the Bush Spurs, Cobb Coe Road, Cedar Loggers Lane, teams lined creeks and drains. A hydrologist was brought in to advise on how heavy rains move objects through a catchment, where accumulation zones might be, where to look if you're searching for something small that doesn't want to be found. The mood had shifted, and a senior officer made it explicit. Detective Chief Superintendent Darren Bennett stood in front of cameras and said it plainly: "We are looking for the remains of William Tyrrell." The sentence was meant for the public, for the searchers, for anyone still holding on to hope that this might end differently. It tightened the language, it tightened the expectations. And then came the moments that always come in searches like this: the false dawns, a sliver of blue cloth found in the bush, a glint of red thread caught on a branch. Both were carefully bagged, labeled, sent to the lab for analysis. Could this be it? Could this be the fabric from William's Spider-Man suit? Days later, the answer came back: no match. A bone fragment was discovered, lifted with gloved fingers, wrapped in foil, rushed to forensic experts. The media ran with it. The public held its breath. And then again, not human. Animal bone. The concrete slab in the garage was examined, scanned, and eventually broken apart. Underneath, nothing. No secret, no evidence. Just dirt and time. The operation lasted weeks. It was thorough, methodical, professional. But in the end, it produced no breakthrough, no proof, no answers. Just the stubborn silence of the ground. And here's what that silence means. Either William isn't there, or he's hidden so well that even the most advanced forensic techniques can't find him. Either the theory that brought investigators back to Kendall in 2021 was wrong, or the evidence has degraded beyond recovery. Or, and this is the possibility that haunts everyone involved, he was never there at all. Around the same time as the 2021 search, police attention turned publicly toward the people who had been in the house that morning, the Foster family, and specifically, the foster mother. A theory took shape in media reports, in inquest testimony, in the careful language of investigators. The theory went like this: what if William's disappearance wasn't an abduction? What if it was an accident? A fall from the balcony, a moment of inattention, a tragedy that unfolded in seconds, and what if, in the panic that followed, combined with the fear of losing their foster children, of being blamed, of the system coming down on them, the foster parents made a terrible choice? What if they concealed what happened? It's a theory, not a fact, not a charge, a theory. And the foster mother has denied it, repeatedly, publicly, under oath. No one has been charged in connection with William Tyrrell's disappearance, but the theory hangs in the air, and it's complicated by other legal matters, separate from William's case, but impossible to ignore. Let me be clear about something. These legal matters are not related to William's disappearance, but they exist in the same timeline, and they color how the public perceives the foster family. In 2022, the foster mother was charged with giving false or misleading evidence to the New South Wales Crime Commission. She went to trial, and she was acquitted. The magistrate credited the possibility of honest mistake under extreme stress rather than intentional deception. In 2024, both foster parents were convicted of intimidation related to an argument that was recorded by police. The foster mother was also convicted of 2 counts of common assault involving the discipline of another child in their care, not William. Those convictions carried weight, but they didn't last. In early 2025, the foster father's intimidation conviction was quashed on appeal. The foster mother's assault convictions were set aside and replaced with a conditional release order. The court recognized what it called unique and heartbreaking stresses: the pressure of living under suspicion for a decade, the media scrutiny, the loss of a child they loved. In a separate matter, both were fined for placing a dummy bid at a property auction in 2024, a regulatory offense, unrelated to William, but it added another line to a growing list. So here's what we're left with: a foster mother who has been investigated, charged, acquitted, convicted, and partially exonerated, all while living under the shadow of the most painful question imaginable. Did you have something to do with William's disappearance? She says no. The evidence so far hasn't proven otherwise. But the investigation continues, the inquest continues, and the theory, accident, panic, concealment, remains on the table. And that's the ethical tightrope this case walks. Because on one hand, investigators have a duty to follow every lead, test every theory, and hold everyone accountable, even the people who loved William most. On the other hand, suspicion without proof is corrosive. It destroys lives. It turns grief into guilt and mourning into a public trial. The foster mother has lived with that for 11 years. She's been questioned, surveilled, charged, and scrutinized in ways most people will never experience. And through it all, she's maintained her innocence. Maybe she's telling the truth. Maybe the investigation has focused on the wrong person, wasted years chasing a theory that doesn't hold up, and missed the real answer in the process. Or maybe the truth is more complicated. Maybe there are things she knows that she hasn't said. Maybe fear, shame, or self-preservation have kept her silent. We don't know, and that's the point. We don't know. What we do know is this: the foster family's legal troubles, separate as they are from William's case, have shaped public perception. They've given weight to the theory. They've made people wonder. And in a case where so much depends on trust, on credibility, on the ability to believe someone's account of what happened that morning, those doubts matter. What's the weather like where you are today? Sunny, rainy, snowing? Let me know in the comments. And if this case has you hooked, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next deep dive. In 2019, the coronial inquest into William Tyrrell's disappearance officially opened. It was a process that would stretch across years, conducted in stages, with long pauses between hearings. Deputy State Coroner Harriet Graham presided, and from the beginning she set the tone. "Guesses and suspicions," she said, "are not enough." The inquest revisited the morning of September 12, 2014, in almost cinematic detail. The angle of the veranda, the positions of adults and children, the sequence of small errands that filled the minutes before the 00 call. Every movement, every word, every decision. It heard from neighbors, from police, from forensic experts, from specialists in scent tracking, bush acoustics, and hydrology, the kind of expert who can predict where a stick will end up in a floodplain after a storm. It explored theories. Abduction by a stranger. Abduction by someone known to the family. Accidental death and concealment. Each theory was tested against the evidence, and each time the evidence fell short. There were moments of tension, moments when the foster mother was questioned about her movements, her timeline, her recollections, moments when the theory of an accident was laid out in stark, uncomfortable detail. But through it all, Coroner Graham held the line. Evidence, not speculation, not rumor, not the weight of public opinion or media pressure. Evidence. By late 2024 and into 2025, the inquest entered its final submissions phase. Legal teams presented their closing arguments. Experts weighed in one last time. And then, silence. As of now, no findings have been delivered. The court is deliberating, weighing the testimony, reviewing the forensic reports, considering what can be known and what must remain, for now, unknowable. And in that liminal space, between the last hearing and the final report, the public waits. The media speculates. Theories harden. Patience wears thin. But the inquest is doing what it's designed to do. It's drawing the boundary lines around what can be proven. It's reminding everyone that a story, no matter how compelling, is not the same as the truth. And the truth, in this case, is still out of reach. Let's circle back to where we started. Dunbogan, the clearing, the Spider-Man suit. New property owners, clearing brush on land they'd just bought, found it tangled in lantana. Red and blue fabric, faded and weathered. Unmistakable. They did the right thing. They called the police. Within hours, the suit was logged as evidence. Photographs were taken. Forensic analysis was ordered. And the media, always watching, always waiting, ran with it. Could this be it? Could this be the breakthrough? Dunbogan is only 20 minutes from Kendall. The timeline could work. The location could work. Maybe, after all these years, the answer had been sitting in the scrub, waiting to be found. But then the results came back. The suit didn't match. The fabric was different. The make was different. It wasn't William's. Police issued a statement. The suit was not connected to the case. And just like that, the moment deflated. But here's the thing. Even though the suit wasn't William's, it did something. It reminded the country that this case is still open, that William Tyrrell is still missing, that somewhere, someone might still know something. Symbols matter, and in a case like this, where so much of the evidence is absence, no body, no witness, no confession, symbols are all we have. A Spider-Man suit in a clearing, a photo on a veranda, a reward poster on a highway, a mother's voice finally breaking 11 years of silence. These are the pieces we hold on to, the pieces that keep the story alive. For 11 years, the foster mother at the center of the William Tyrrell case has lived under a microscope. Every word she's said has been analyzed, every movement has been scrutinized, every inconsistency has been weaponized, and for much of that time, she stayed silent. or as silent as someone in her position can be. But in recent months, through court testimony, through legal proceedings, through the inquest, her voice has emerged. Not in a single explosive interview, not in a carefully staged media appearance, but in fragments, in moments, in the careful, measured language of someone who knows that every word matters. So what has she said? She said that she loved William, that he was her son in every way that mattered, that the morning he disappeared was ordinary until it wasn't, that she turned her back for a moment, just a moment, and he was gone. She said that she searched, that she called his name until her voice gave out, that she drove the streets, knocked on doors, begged neighbors for help. She said that the theory, the one that suggests she knows more than she's told, that William died in an accident and she concealed it, is wrong, that it's cruel, that it's destroyed her life. She said that she's been investigated, surveilled, charged, and convicted of things that have nothing to do with William, that the weight of suspicion has crushed her, that she's lost everything, and she said again and again that she doesn't know what happened to him. But here's where it gets complicated, because while she's denied involvement, the investigation has continued to focus on her, the inquest has continued to explore the theory, and the public, watching from a distance, piecing together fragments of testimony and media reports, has continued to wonder, is she telling the truth, or is she protecting herself? It's a question that doesn't have an easy answer, because the evidence, as it stands, doesn't definitively point in either direction. There's no forensic proof that William died in an accident at the house, but there's also no proof that he was abducted. There's no witness who saw him leave the yard, but there's also no witness who saw what happened inside it. What we're left with is testimony, memory, interpretation, and the uncomfortable reality that sometimes the truth is unknowable. The foster mother's voice, finally heard after years of silence, doesn't resolve the mystery. It deepens it. Because now we have to decide, do we believe her? And that decision says as much about us as it does about her. If you believe her, then this is a story about a woman who lost a child and then lost everything else, her reputation, her privacy, her peace. A woman who has been punished for a crime she didn't commit, simply because she was there when it happened. If you don't believe her, then this is a story about a cover-up, about fear and self-preservation, about a moment of panic that spiraled into a decade of lies. Both versions are possible. Both versions fit the known facts, and that's what makes this case so agonizing. Because we want certainty, we want answers, we want someone to be guilty or innocent, right or wrong, truthful or deceptive. But life, especially life in the aftermath of tragedy, is rarely that clean. The foster mother has spoken. She's denied involvement. She's expressed grief. She's asked to be believed. And now the question is, will she be? This case has more twists than any thriller I've ever covered. If you want more deep dives like this, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. And drop a comment. Do you think the foster mother is telling the truth? Do you think we'll ever know what really happened to William? Let's talk about it. 11 years, 4,000 days, nearly 100,000 hours. That's how long William Tyrrell has been missing. A child who vanished in minutes, surrounded by people who loved him. A case that consumed a town, an investigation, and a nation's attention. A mystery that has resisted every attempt to solve it. And here's what we're left with. A photo of a boy in a Spider-Man suit, crouched on a veranda, grinning at the camera. So where does that leave us? 11 years later, the case is still open. The inquest is still pending. The reward is still unclaimed. And William Tyrrell is still missing. But the story isn't over. Because as long as there are questions, there's a chance, however small, that someone, somewhere, will finally speak up. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves true crime. And subscribe if you haven't already. I cover cases like this every week, and your support keeps this channel going. Drop a comment with your thoughts. Do you believe the foster mother? Do you think this was an abduction or something else? What do you think happened to William Tyrrell? Let's talk about it. Because these conversations matter. They keep cases alive. They keep pressure on investigators. And sometimes, just sometimes, they lead to answers. Thanks for watching Crime Cortex. I'll see you in the next one. A street where two cars may or may not have been parked. A scent trail that ended at the edge of a yard. A $1 million reward that no one has claimed. An investigation that turned on itself, prosecuting its own lead detective. A 2021 search that found fabric and bone but no answers. A foster mother who has denied involvement but remains under suspicion. An inquest that has deliberated for years and still hasn't delivered findings. And a Spider-Man suit found in a clearing 20 minutes away that turned out to be nothing at all. These are the pieces. And they don't fit together. Not cleanly. Not in a way that gives us the ending we want. Because the truth is, we may never know what happened to William Tyrrell. We may never know if he was taken by a stranger, or if something happened at the house. We may never know if the cars on Benaroon Drive were significant, or if they were just cars. We may never know if the investigation focused on the right people, or if the real answer slipped through the cracks years ago. What we do know is this. A small town learned how quickly it could become a crime scene, and how slowly it can return to itself afterward. An investigation ran long enough to become part of the case it was investigating. The law did its work, sometimes messily, sometimes imperfectly, but it kept the room honest. $1 million still sits on the table, waiting for someone to claim it, and a family, foster or otherwise, has lived with grief, suspicion, and unanswered questions for over a decade. That's the cost of a case like this. It's not just the boy who's lost, it's everyone who gets pulled into the orbit of his absence.